OMG, Joe Giudice has new hope United States re-entry. Joe Giudice has become known to audiences through Real Housewives of New Jersey. Giudice recently shared that his attempts to gain American citizenship ultimately fell through. Despite this, he hasn't given up hope and even thinks he knows who could possibly help him. Originally from Italy, Joe Giudice currently lives in the Bahamas. Joe's spouse, Teresa Giudice, originally Teresa Gorga, rose to prominence on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. Joe himself also notably appeared on the show throughout the years, starting in 2009. The two married in 1999 and divorced back in 2020. Joe was born in Salerno, Italy, though he spent much of his life in the United States. Following legal trouble in 2013, Joe was deported to Italy in 2019. Following this, however, he relocated to the Bahamas. However, Joe is still set on returning to the United States. This past Wednesday, as noted by People, Joe recently shared an update on his attempts at becoming a United States citizen on his ex-wife Teresa Giudice's podcast, Turning the Tables. Joe shared, "I got a lawyer working on something, but she's been working on it. Hasn't done anything yet, so I don't know. We'll see." A fan asked Joe if he thought a certain politician could help him. Joe continued, "I did get in front of the embassy and they denied me because I guess I'm a big criminal." He claimed that the process did not last even 5 minutes before his application was denied. During the podcast, a fan asked Joe if he thought the recent re-election of President Donald Trump could give him a second chance. Joe admitted, "When I met Trump, he was very nice to me. I was very nice to him when we were on his show over there. I don't know. I think he should get me back." Currently in NASA, Joe has since found work in construction and is even an amateur fighter. He admitted as much as he misses the United States, he feels NASA is pretty close to home. He claimed the island is kind of Americanized and he often sees American people here. Joe continued, "Everywhere you go, everybody speaks English here. I know how to read the language. Everything here is just regular English." Joe admitted that made things easier than living in Italy. He noted, "I know how to talk here. In Italy, I knew how to talk, but I didn't know how to read." Joe Giudice had always been a fighter. Whether it was growing up in Paterson, running his businesses, or navigating the highs and lows of his high-profile marriage to Teresa Giudice, he had never backed down from a challenge. But nothing had tested him quite like the years following his deportation to Italy. Being forced to leave behind his 4 daughters, his family, and the only country he had truly known was a punishment that had weighed heavily on him. But now, for the first time in years, a glimmer of hope was emerging. Joe Giudice had a real shot at re-entering the United States. News of Joe's potential return sent shockwaves through the Real Housewives of New Jersey fan base. For years, viewers had watched the Giudice family's roller coaster journey, prison sentences, court battles, heartbreak, and ultimately, Teresa moving on with Luis Ruiz. But through it all, Joe had remained steadfast in his love for his daughters. And now, legal experts suggested that there was a path forward, a legal loophole that might finally allow him to come back. Rumors began swirling when Joe's legal team filed new paperwork, citing changes in immigration policy and new legal precedents that could work in his favor. His attorney, a well-respected immigration specialist, argued that Joe's deportation had been an excessive punishment, considering he had lived in the U.S. since childhood and had served his time. They emphasized his strong family ties and the hardship his absence had caused his children. His daughters, especially Gia, had been vocal about their hopes for his return, using their platforms to advocate for a second chance for their father. For Joe, this wasn't just about setting foot on American soil again. It was about reclaiming his role as a father in person, not just through FaceTime calls and holiday visits to the Bahamas. His daughters had grown so much in his absence. Gia, once a little girl sobbing over family troubles, was now a college graduate with law school ambitions. Gabriella had remained her quiet, studious self, excelling academically. Melania, always the firecracker, had transformed into a confident young woman. And Adriana, the baby of the family, was growing up faster than he could keep up with from afar. He had missed so much, and he was determined not to miss any more. Meanwhile, Teresa's reaction to the news was met with curiosity. Although she had moved on with Louis, her bond with Joe was undeniable. He was the father of her children, her partner in crime for 2 decades, and someone she had shared the most tumultuous moments of her life with. While she had openly admitted to no longer being in love with Joe, she had also expressed hope that he could one day return for the sake of their daughters. Still, there was the question of how Louis felt about Joe possibly being a more present figure in their lives. Louis had played a significant role in Teresa's daughters' lives since their marriage, stepping into a father figure role while Joe was away. But sources close to the family suggested that Louis wasn't against Joe's return. In fact, he understood how important it was for the girls to have their father back. The real tension, however, might come from the dynamic between Joe and Teresa. Could they truly co-parent without the old wounds reopening? Could Joe return to New Jersey and reintegrate into a world that had changed so much since he left? The legal battle wasn't going to be easy. Immigration cases, especially those involving deported felons, were rarely straightforward. But Joe had something he hadn't had before: a growing support system rallying behind him. Gia had even hinted at the idea of getting into immigration law to help people like her father, and she was determined to fight for his return. With her growing influence and legal knowledge, she was ready to advocate in a way that few others could. Joe, on the other hand, was cautiously optimistic. While he had built a life for himself in the Bahamas, he had never considered it home. Home was where his daughters were, where his roots had been planted long ago. He had made mistakes, big ones, but he had paid for them. Now he wanted to prove that he could be a present father, a guiding hand in his daughters' lives, and maybe even a mentor to others who had made missteps in their pasts. In typical OMG fashion, the potential of Joe's return also sparked drama. Some of Teresa's castmates had strong opinions. Jennifer A. Dean, always loyal to Teresa, was supportive, believing that family came first. Dolores Catania, a longtime friend of both Teresa and Joe, had always been in Joe's corner and saw this as a long overdue opportunity. But there were whispers that Margaret Josephs, who had been critical of Joe in the past, questioned whether Teresa was truly ready for this shift in her world. And then, of course, there was the looming possibility of a RHONG moment that could redefine the entire dynamic of the show. What would it look like if Joe Giudice, the man once at the center of the franchise's biggest scandal, made a grand return? Would Bravo cameras capture his emotional reunion with his daughters? Would there be an awkward sit-down between Joe, Teresa, and Louis? Would he and Melissa Gorga, his sister-in-law with whom he had a famously rocky relationship, finally find common ground? Joe wasn't thinking about all of that just yet. For now, he was focused on one thing: getting home. The legal process would take time, and nothing was guaranteed, but he was willing to fight. He had fought for everything else in his life, and this, his family, his future, his second chance, was the most important battle yet. As he sat in the Bahamas, looking out at the ocean, he allowed himself a rare moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would soon hear those long-awaited words: "Welcome back to the United States, Mr. Giudice." And when that day came, he'd be ready.